Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Road to Real Estate Podcast. We're just going to ask you to do the things like, subscribe, follow, hit notification bell, and Lauren's on an amazing giveaway.
Yay! We have our Yeti raffle. Are you summer ready, Yeti? We have our Roadie 24 that we're giving away. Check the link below, fill it out, and you could win.
It's easy to do. Here's our title
Yay!
screen. Welcome to the Road to Real Estate Podcast, where Jon and Lauren help you grow your real estate business. Enjoy the show. All right, everybody. We got a tough conversation today. It's all about difficult conversations. See how I did that, guys?
Yeah.
That was all accidental.
Very clever, very clever.
Listen, there are a lot of emotions in real estate, and so you're going to run into a lot of people, and good people in tough situations or stressful situations, or get anxious, get nervous, and you're going to end up conversations that are difficult, whether it be pricing a home or a situation where you make a mistake and you have to deal with it. So that's what we're talking about today. Want to take it away, Miss Lauren?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the areas where, as a newer agent, more of your contracts fall out, less things close. The deals that you have sometimes fall apart, or you have more hiccups or speed bumps. And one of the reasons is I don't know that as real estate agents, we're actually given any kind of professional guidance on how to deal with tough conversations. And with anything in life, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so a little bit of thought ahead of time about having tougher conversations at the listing appointment, tougher conversations, as you're going on the market, tougher conversations with your buyer can actually make a smoother process for you with your contracts, with your clients, with the whole entire transaction. And so I think that this is something that is easily overlooked until you're later in your career. And I think that it's a really important aspect.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to try to avoid a tough conversation because you're not trying to be confrontational with the person, because you're trying to work with them or you're trying to be their best friend so that way they do business with you. But sometimes getting into that tougher conversation and getting through that tough time, that stressful moment, helps them realize what's actually going on in a situation, and how you handle those conversations is going to determine whether they work with you again or if that's the end of your relationship. But at the same time, having a tough conversation the right way helps show that you are capable of handling this job and being their realtor. Whether, I mean, I've had to do it a couple weeks ago when we had to do a price reduction on a house where the guy was adamant, and I knew what he put his house on the market for. And we had to sit down and be like, listen, we've been on the market for a couple of weeks, and I told you this was going to happen when we did our first listing appointment. Let them know that there's a possibility that we're going to have to reduce the price on the property. And then we had to have that tough conversation where we reduced the price down to essentially what he paid for it 3 or 4 years ago, which is what no one wants to hear. I mean, at least it's not lower than what he wants to, at this time. We may have to have that conversation if we still stay on the market. But, you know,
Yeah, tough conversations are a part of real estate because the reality is that the buyer or seller, your client, is the one who is emotional because this is their personal sale. It's
mm-hmm,
also one of the top 5 things that are the most stressful in life.
mm-hmm.
What are the 5 Ds? Death, divorce, diapers, diamonds, and I don't know, selling houses.
Yeah,
I
we
don't
don't
know
get
what
a
the last
D.
D is.
We're the non-D and the
Yeah,
5Ds.
but there are things that are very stressful in life, and buying and selling real estate is one of them. I mean, you might be moving across country, you might be changing job. It may be a happy stress. Maybe you're having a baby and you need another bedroom. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is definitely stressful. Packing up your life, having strangers come into your house, or looking for the right house, going into strangers' houses, trying to figure out if
Mm-hmm.
they fit, financing, all the paperwork. So it is very natural and is very expected that our clients will be stressed.
Yeah, and when someone's stressed, they tend to act differently than they normally would in their day-to-day lives. I will say, before, as a realtor, I bought multiple homes, sold multiple homes, and I can't remember a single one where you kind of hit a breaking point of, what are we doing? I mean, the first house we ever bought, I got to the point where I was talking to my wife, like, I think maybe we should just get an apartment. I was done. It was like there was so much paperwork, and we're going through it, and we're trying to come up with the closing cost number, that huge number, like how you can't afford to buy a house. I have to have this much money, and and well, obviously we made it through it and it worked out. But it's like when you're going through it, especially if it's your first time and you've not gone through it before, and you don't know what to expect. It is tough, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we didn't take that up with our realtor. We took that up between us. And but sometimes it comes out on the realtor, and that is what it is. So
Well, and knowing that now, maybe that realtor you used in Florida, maybe that was something you could have leaned into a little bit more, or maybe it's
we
something you
totally could
couldn't.
have.
And so, and depending on who that is and how you position yourself, right,
Uh-huh,
makes a really big difference. If I recall correctly, I think we even had an appraisal problem. Yeah, it wasn't not a big one, but when you
uh-huh.
guys were first moving to Georgia, and
Oh, both
having
houses. All three houses that we've ever purchased have had appraisal problems.
well, and you guys have purchased. Well, I don't know about Florida, but here, I mean, during a hot market, both
Yeah.
times, a seller's market, multiple offers and things like that, and so. Having those conversations, even with you guys, was super, super important. Now,
Hmm.
you guys do not know Jonathan's wonderful wife, but she is she is very pragmatic. She is very go getter. She is very logical, and you don't always find that in a client. So it was refreshing, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's still a conversation that you want to prepare people for and have ahead of time because it's one of the things that
Yeah.
we
I
that we
also,
deal with.
by the time you got to us, we had been through multiple deals. The first two were not nearly as smooth. They were way more stressful, but you get to know how things are. And we also, that first house we bought was right after the recession. So the requirements for getting a loan were here. The amount of
Hmm.
proving our finances, proving our everything was, I swear it's so much easier today to get a loan than it was that 14 years ago?
Yeah, well, the new lending laws have just come into place, the Dodd-Frank Act, and it it was hard. Lenders didn't know, what would happen. They didn't know where they could push and where they couldn't push. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't know if they were going to lose their license if they did it incorrectly, or how to sell on the secondary market and what was going to sell better and what was not. And so you're right. There was a lot of extra stuff needed because everybody was trying to learn and do the letter of the law and follow everything so tightly. And now, not that the laws have changed, but people have interpreted them and tested them a little, and so
They
now
got
they
more
know better.
comfortable doing
Hmm.
it. Yeah, that makes
Yeah, so
sense.
that's a good thing. The other thing is that we're more digital now, so PDFs and like online, even like an ADP or a check stub system is now online. So sending a PDF of your check stubs is way less stressful than,
Yeah.
oh, I'm at work, I have to go home, I have to look in a drawer, I have to scan that in, I have to, now you can even just take a screenshot with your phone. I mean, how much has technology helped when it comes
Oh,
to
if
paperwork?
we want to do technology, our when we sold our house, it sold so fast, it sold out from under us, and so we ended up living in a hotel room. So I had my printer and fax machine set up in a hotel machine. Yeah, fax machine, people.
Did you say
And I
fax
am
machine?
copying and faxing documents over to all the things. So like this whole thing with a portal where everything is done, digital signatures, that didn't happen then. It was sign it, scan it, fax it, or it was just back and forth, back and forth. It was good times. Did you get to fax? Did you get to fax? Like,
Yeah, I mean, well, it's really funny, Jonathan. You just really took me back because I have like blanked out fax machines out of my memory. But I was using fax machines when I started in real estate. It was not I mean, it was long ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And I remember with my contracts, I was having to look at them and go, okay, is this clear enough that when this gets faxed 3 or 4 times, we're still going to be able to read it? And so I was really having to look at my contracts differently, which is ironic because we were also writing them in more than typing them at that point. And in my real estate office, no joke, we had a legitimate typewriter.
wow, a typewriter.
Yeah, and
That's
it wasn't
hardcore.
it wasn't necessarily for everybody to use all the time, but there were certain documents that it had to be typed a certain way. And so we still had carbon copies of like papers and stuff when we turned in our contract. So it was not that long ago before everything changed.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
before my real estate time.
Yeah. But you were still selling houses or buying and selling personally then.
Yeah.
So, so back to our tough conversations. So, I mean, I
We're
guess
trying to avoid a tough conversation by doing all these little runabouts. Like, we don't want to do it. It's okay. See? Even we do it.
yeah, we kind of hit on why it's important, to handle something up front versus on the back end is a totally different it's a totally different situation. When you have the conversation up front, you control the timing of it, you control when it happens, you control the conversation. When it happens on the back end, it's a
Yeah.
surprise. You
Yeah.
might be in the middle of something for family. We just it was just Mother's Day here, and and I had to leave a Mother's Day celebration to go have a conversation with a seller. And a little bit of prevention could have helped me to prevent that. Now, sometimes we don't know when something's going to happen,
Hmm.
but other times. So I think that your time, protecting your time, number one, is important for these tough conversations. Number two, I think that you have to realize that you look more like a professional when you prepare your clients for the road ahead.
Yes. It's always easier when you prep them for a conversation that's going to come later. When it comes out of the nowhere and you're not ready for it, it catches you off guard and you're not prepared for it yourself when you have that conversation. You do your best to be professional and handle the situation as smoothly as possible, but it's a lot easier when you're prepared for that conversation.
Yeah, being blindsided and then having to get into the moment is a little bit harder. Sometimes I mean, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but sometimes I find that in the moment, I don't know what else is happening and it triggers a stress response for me. And so I'm
Oh,
more
yeah.
likely to respond in a less professional way when I'm caught off guard than when I'm prepared and I'm in my professional moment, right? I have business hours and then I have fun hours. And so if something businessy happens during my fun hours, sometimes I react differently. And so
Hmm.
having these conversations up front, preparing them for price reductions, preparing them for the market, what you're going to see in negotiations, it really makes a difference. The other thing that I have seen is that, similar to what you said, Jonathan, you guys tried to handle things on your own. When people don't know what's going to happen, they create their own narrative.
Mm.
And that might be about the buyer. It might be about the seller. It might be about the situation. It might be about you, right?
Yeah.
And so people left to their own devices make up stories. And they're not trying to lie, they're not trying to hurt anybody. It is the natural human way. We like to connect dots.
Yeah.
And
Well,
not
like,
everyone is good at connecting dots.
exactly. Like, for instance, our first seller, which or first realtor, we've bought and sold multiple homes through that person before we met you, in a different state. Um, it could have easily, since we handled it on our own and we didn't bother her with what we were going through and she didn't prep us for what we were going through, we could have easily landed on an apartment and not bought that first house, and she would have lost that sale without knowing why. But if she would have prepped us for the stress that we were about to go through and prepared us for what was coming down the line, would have probably made it less of a coin toss. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She got lucky and the sale went through because we worked our way through it, but it could have just as easily gone the other way. And if she had a conversation, we would have known to expect that amount of stuff on our plate at that time financially, because we were a young couple and we did the whole let's pick this house, and then it underappraised and we already paid for the inspection, so our money was getting cut down, cut down, cut down, because we're spending money every time. It's like every time we look at a house, we lose. At the time, it was like $500. I was like, we're losing $500, and we got this far into it, and now that money's gone, and we're gonna do it again, and we're gonna lose money again. And for us at that time, $500 is it's a lot of money, you know. And it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's still a lot of money. I mean,
But
it's
you
a
do
good
that a
chunk.
couple of times, it all of a sudden we were close to hitting our FHA requirements, and every time we did it, we were taken away, but we still had our regular living expenses. So building that money back up was tougher and tougher and tougher, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she could have prepped us a little bit better for that, you know.
Yeah.
She's a
No,
good
it's a
realtor,
great.
you know. But go ahead.
That's what I was gonna say. It's a great point. Even sometimes we sit down and we have our buyer consultations and our seller consultations, which are so important. This is where a lot of these questions and a lot of these expectations for the transaction flush out. And it's part of why they're so important. But on top of that, I had a buyer one time that even though we were talking to FHA and FHA is a 3.5% down payment, they only heard 3%. And we were in a house and they were like, Lauren, this is our dream house. This is what we want.
Mm-hmm.
I write up the contract and the husband calls me and he's like, I'm so sorry. I only have 3% saved up.
Mm.
I don't know where I got confused, but I only have 3.5%. I only have 3%. I don't have 3.5. And we said, okay, no problem. We paused the transaction. We got out of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
We bought 6 months later. But at the time, it was a really tough conversation for them because they
Well,
felt like
yeah.
they found their dream house and they were ready to go and they were very excited. And so it really changed some things for them. But
Oh,
it
yeah.
was a hard conversation, but we didn't have it at the closing table.
Yeah. Well, another
We had
thing
it
that
ahead of time.
we had to learn is going through that time period, a lot of buyers are going against cash offers. And so
Hmm.
for us going through that, like when you fall in love with a house, and obviously if you've never bought a house before, you find that home that is everything. And you can picture yourself in that home and it's perfect. And that then someone pays more than you and buys your dream house. And the fact that we didn't get that house, I remember going to the realtor at the time and going like, how did we not get it? We gave full asking price. We did this, we did that. What went wrong? And they're like, this is the market we're in right now. And at your price point, and for everyone out there, that price point was like $120,000 back then. Things have changed.
Yeah, you can't find that anymore.
We were competing against people that were just buying cash. And it was just like, when it first happened, it was crushing. And that conversation for us was like, what did you do wrong? Why didn't you tell us we had to do more? You know what I mean? Like, and it's not the realtor's fault, but it was a tough conversation because it took everything for us to stay with that realtor because we were like, that's your job to do the house. And we weren't prepared to not get what we wanted. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
how
And
tough the
so
market was, right? I mean,
it was a really tough market. There was so much cash offers stuff. I mean, by the fifth one that we didn't get, it went to another conversation because it was like we're never going to get a house. We put so many offers in. We're giving everything they're asking for, and we're just losing out, losing out, losing out. And so that was another conversation that we had to have that was tough with our realtor. Was like, what's going on? Why can't we buy a home? You know. So.
yeah, no, that is a tough conversation. Um, I think that having those conversations up front, can definitely save you. That's a really good point that you have. I think that it's also how you have the conversation,
Mhm.
right? These tough conversations. I have some of them pre-scripted. They're already written into our buyer consultations, our seller consultations. Those are part of it. On another side of it, though, you also have to come with compassion and
Mhm.
care because it's not the buyer or seller's fault that they don't know.
Of
That's
course, they haven't gone
literally
through it.
your job, right?
Yeah.
That to help them and guide them through this transaction. And so coming from a place of care, coming from a place of concern, coming from a place of like educating, not judging,
Mhm.
can make a world of difference because I don't know you haven't told me about those experiences, but there are some times when as agents we sound like we're chastising or that we're um, making you feel like it's your fault. And I think that you have to be really careful that you say, hey, this is the market, this is the transaction, this is, not you, take the you and the I out of it and just say, this is the market, this is what's happening. This happens sometimes, making sure that you're not placing like a blame or you're not being judgmental when you're talking about those specific things because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
That's where I come from when I talk to people about it. Like I explained to them because I went through these emotions and they were unexpected for me, and because I've had those experiences, I tell people that I'm talking to about buying. Like I had a conversation this weekend with a buyer, and I said, here's the deal: you're buying your first home in the U.S. Just remember, this is going to be, it's going to be stressful, but you have me on your side, and I'm going to get you through it. There's going to be financial talks that you're going to have with your wife and stuff like that, because it's daunting. And it's like, also, there's a good chance we're going to find your dream home and you're going to love it, and we won't be able to purchase it for a specific reason, whether someone else outbids us or somebody does us. It's just, it's part of the process, and I've been through it on both sides of the ball, where we've wanted a house and haven't got it, as a realtor and as a consumer. So because I have some of those experiences, I feel like I would have never thought to have that conversation if I haven't gone through it on their side. And
Mhm.
thankfully, or not thankfully, I've had a lot of these situations in real life. I'm not sure which way to take it. When you're going through it, it sucks, but when you can fall on it for experience, it helps. And obviously, you've been in the buying and selling a lot longer. You've been through these conversations from your point of view many more times than I have.
Mhm.
But I at least have a well of going through it from their side and knowing what it feels like. I'm not saying that's better or worse.
Yeah, it's
You go
just a
through it,
different.
different perspective on it. So I try to hit people with all the negatives up front. Like, hey, some of this stuff's going to happen. We're ready for it. We'll get through it, rather than having it happen and then have to explain it, you
Yeah,
know?
no transaction's perfect. No person is perfect. No house is perfect. I do find that some people think like, oh, this is my dream house. And then they find one crack or one something wrong, and it shatters that image that they have, that or that falls from the pedestal, that high pedestal they put it on. But I think that as the professional, our job, and this is something somebody told me early on, was to tell the weather, right?
Yeah.
The weatherman doesn't care if it's rainy or sunny or snowy or I don't know, hurricaney. I'm not sure. Maybe they
Oh,
get
they love
excited.
hurricanes. I've
Well,
seen it.
for Florida, yeah, maybe. But it doesn't change them. They know that the next day it's going to be sunny or rainy again, or
Hmm.
there'll be another hurricane down the line. So when you think about giving the information or telling the news, like for example, you just talked about not getting 5 offers in a row, right? You're not getting
Hmm.
5 contracts after you put offers on houses that you loved. You have to tell the weather. You have
Hmm.
empathy, right? You care,
Hmm.
but you have to be the professional so that the buyer seller can feel their emotion.
Yeah, of course, they need to be validated for
Mm-hmm.
sure, and feel like they're being heard. Because if you brush it off, they're like, this person's not in this with me.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to get their cut, and you need to be compassionate and empathy and make sure they understand that you understand, but you also know that there's sunshine on the other side of that storm,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and positive, right? I
hmm.
mean, there's definitely they can be upset, and that is completely a very natural and appropriate feeling. However, you know, you are the one that there's other fish in the sea, like, hey,
Yeah, yeah.
I know this felt like the right house, but let's find there's going to be another right house out there. Let's figure it out. I think that another thing that people overlook when they're trying to have these tough conversations is they try to make things sound too good.
Hmm.
They're so worried about hurting people's feelings, they forget to be honest.
Yeah, oh, yeah, you're so afraid of offending somebody, so you don't really push it to where it needs to go. Like, I don't know how the best way to describe that is. Um, yeah, I need an example. Show me.
Yeah, walking into a house where the seller is a smoker and pretending like you don't smell the cigarette smoke. That is a
I get it.
disservice to the seller, right?
Yeah, because it's going to cost them
Hmm.
offers on their home
Or
for
you
sure.
go into the basement and you say, "What's the smell? Did you have cats or is there a water leak?" Right?
Yeah,
Like you have to say, "Hey, I noticed this when I walked in the door." So
which means
they
other
will
people
notice
will
it.
too.
When
Hmm.
I walk into a house, I can tell you if there is dampness in the crawl space or the basement. I can tell you if there's a water problem somewhere. I can tell you just by the humidity in the house. There are certain smells that I know. Maybe this is a negative, but like I can tell you when there's mold in a house. I can feel it on my lips. Actually, Jonathan, I think you and I think we did this at
Oh
least in one
yeah.
of the houses we were in. Like there's just a feeling I get on my lips or in my mouth if there's certain types of mold. Now, mold is natural. It grows everywhere, especially in Georgia, we're the mold capital of the world because we have this hot, humid climate, and it doesn't get hot enough to burn it off, and it doesn't get cold enough to freeze it out. And so we have a lot of mold. We have a lot of moisture here, and I can tell. And those are the
Hmm.
kind of things that if you have a seller and you don't have that conversation honestly with them up front, then it comes out during the inspection. It comes out after showing after showing
Hmm.
and no offers.
Yeah. And then another thing we can jump right onto that with is you cannot out advertising a house that is priced too high. You can spend all the money you want, you can put it everywhere, but if no one's attracted to it at that price point, you're going to sit on the market and there's nothing to do. So being upfront and honest when you're pricing someone's house, when they tell you, hey, I think it's worth this, and in your head, you know, like, yeah, it seems a little high, but I kind of want to make them happy. I want to make this deal. Then next thing you know, when nothing's happening, they're like, why aren't you selling my home? And it's because you put yourself into a conversation that you messed up. And when if you'd had that conversation early and said, "Hey, listen, I did your comparable properties, and I really feel like we should be at this price point," um, even if they think they should be higher, you make that decision up front, or at least let them know, like, "Hey, listen, this is where I think we should be. We can try your way, but just know that if nothing happens and we get no action in a couple weeks, I want to come to this price because this is where I feel we should be." Listen, if it works out, that's fine, but we need to make sure we know that this is where I feel we should be. And that way, when the time comes to reduce the price, you've already had the tough conversation. You've already talked about it before you even went on the market, that price reduction was coming. And
Mm-hmm.
they're more prepared for it. It's not blindsided. Like, but you told me 2 weeks ago that we were going to be at this point. Why are we now going there? I'm happy with this number. I don't want that number. And by prepping them ahead of time, it's like it's an easier pill to swallow. We gave them it up front. They kind of know what's coming. They got their fingers crossed for an offer on that initial price. And if it doesn't happen, they're ready. You know,
Mm-hmm.
now you feel like you've done your due diligence in terms of having that conversation, that pre-conversation. So when you have the real one, it's like, okay, man, we've talked about this. Time has come. It's, it made it super easy. My client, we had to do a price reduction. I was nervous about the price that he wanted initially, but because of the way things were priced in the neighborhood, we were kind of in the ballpark, so I felt like it was okay. And then obviously it was too high. But yeah, the conversation was easy versus, yeah, dude, that's no problem. That's our price. And then having to shock him with it 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later.
Yeah, and I think, when you're talking about price specifically, I think you have to talk about who determines the price.
Mm-hmm.
It is not actually the seller and it's not the
Yeah.
agent. Technically, the buyer is the one who decides the price of the house.
Mm-hmm.
What is it worth compared to what else is on the market and what else you can buy with that same money? And the
Mm-hmm.
buyer is the one who decides that. Think about this. The buyer actually has more power than the buyer realizes. Number
Mm-hmm.
one, they offer the price for the contract,
Yeah.
right? Period. They write the
If all
offer.
the if all the buyers could get together, they could set the price for the entire market.
Hmm. We do
Technically.
not recommend that. That's price fixing and collusion and all kinds of things where,
Yeah, but
but
they're not in a thing. But like, there's a
yeah.
thing. Like, but people think the appraiser sets the price. What's the appraisal going to be? What's the appraisal going to be? But it's not the appraiser either. The appraiser can say it's here, but if everyone only wants to pay this, it doesn't matter what the appraiser says. This is it's what it sells for is what it's actually worth.
Yeah, and we see that all the time when a person gets a pre-listing appraisal and then that's not what a buyer's willing to pay for it. Or on the flip side, you go under contract and your appraisal comes in low, but the buyer says, I can't buy another house with blah, blah, blah
Mm-hmm. And they
at
pay
this
above it.
price,
Mm-hmm.
and they pay above it. I mean, there is a lot of power in being a buyer that sometimes we don't realize. And so when we talk about price reduction, sometimes it's like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I appreciate that we feel like that this is where the value is, but the buyers at this moment in this market
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah,
right? And that may just be a situation, you only need one person to buy it, but they have to see the value in it in order to make that offer and get started on it. So I think pricing is definitely one of those conversations that can be really tough to have.
mm-hmm.
And with pricing, even ahead of time, being real about the condition of the house, being real about what repairs would make a difference. And they don't have to necessarily take your advice. They don't have to follow what you do. Um, in fact, we just ran into this situation where we have a seller that we wanted them to replace a set of doors and they didn't, and now it's become an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a surprise because we said, yeah, we told you when we first did the walkthrough, hey, these probably need to be replaced. And he said, hey, I don't have the money for it. I can't swing that. And we said, okay, well, just know that since you don't have the money up front for it, you're probably going to have to negotiate it somehow. And it may come out of your overall earnings for the house.
Yeah.
And so, having those conversations, I mean, we had it again this week, so it didn't really help. It did, but it was like a, hey, we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you weren't aware of it. So having those tough conversations up front, they don't always turn out perfectly, but it helps reinforce what you
Yeah.
said.
And I don't know how far we want to go into this, but I opened a house at this property this weekend, and I was part of the problem. I was trying to assist, and I had no idea that there was a problem with those doors, and it caused another issue, which turned into a tough conversation on my end because I got a phone call from an angry seller, and I did my best to quell him and be apologetic and offer to repair anything that was damaged. But yeah, it was also one of those moments where I was having my day on, it was Mother's Day, and I get this call in the evening. I'm like, wow, someone from Atlanta is calling. Did someone see one of my things? I was only thinking it could be a new buyer or a seller. I was excited. It was like, because I don't know this number. Or it could have been for my other industry. But I was just like, I answered the phone with my jovial, hey, how's it going? Da-da. And then I just got an earful and I was like, what is going on? Oh man. And it was taken so back, it knocked me right out of my comfort zone because I was not prepared for the conversation. I didn't realize it was coming. I had no idea. So it put me into a real difficult conversation. And all you can do in those situations is apologize and offer to do it. But what actually happened is the doorknob came off. And I did my best to put it back, and I did offer to replace it. But the conversation turned into the person wanted the entire French door situation replaced. But I had no idea that it was already a topic of conversation before. So that's a short and sweet little tangent on me causing the
Well,
confrontation.
but here's the thing. I don't know that this is where we go back to. No house is perfect. No agent is perfect. No seller is perfect. And preparing people for things are going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are strangers walking in your house, literally. Having those conversations up front and just understanding that nobody's coming to this situation 100% perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we did have follow-up conversations with the seller and obviously with Jonathan, but the reality is that we had to give him a little bit of a check, like, hey, that door was part of what we told you to fix.
Yeah.
And now in hindsight, it's becoming a problem, and it's a bigger problem because we didn't fix it on the front end.
Yeah.
And so those are the conversations that, we try to have, and we're not perfect either. Sometimes those, we can impress something, but ultimately it's the seller's choice. And so having that conversation with sellers and having those conversations, it's just really important to try to stay professional, stay calm. Jonathan did a great job being apologetic and trying to come up with solutions, right? Don't jump in the problem and swim around with them. Don't be combative. Don't fight with them. You're not here to win an argument.
Mm-hmm.
You're here to win the transaction. And
Yeah.
so, what does that look like? And Jonathan did a great job. Hey, how can I fix it? How can I make it better? What can I do? And sometimes people are just mad and they're just trying to vent. And I think that was the case this time. If he had been able to get something out of it, he probably would have as well. But
Yeah.
and people are like that, right? If they see they can get something out of it,
Mm-hmm.
they might make an issue bigger than it is.
But also, I can kind of put myself in his shoes a little bit because I feel like if I was away and I had someone in my home and something happened, I'd feel different about it than if I was there when it happened. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Hmm.
I try to empathize with him and understand where he's coming from. And that's why I offered to replace the doorknob and everything else. And because it's like, it feels worse. It's like, if someone breaks into your home and goes through your stuff, even if they don't take anything, you still feel violated because something happened. And I try to feel that way with him when we were going through. It's like, I get it. It's happened, and I'm a professional, and I obviously hate that it happened while I was in the home under my watch. And I wanted them to know that I get it. I'm sorry this happened. It sucks that it happened. I do what I can to make it right, you know. And we'll see what happens. He hasn't responded to my my offer,
Oh,
so.
no, it's fine. We've talked to him lots of times, so don't worry about that. And and here's I'm gonna throw something out there for the world. There were two showings before Jonathan got to the house.
Mhm.
Anyone could have done that and put it back on and just waited for you to be the one to catch the fall for it.
Mhm.
Right. And so when we have situations like that, we have people coming into houses and we don't 100% know what happened. Not because Jonathan didn't tell us the truth, but because we don't have all the details. We're not watching a sitcom where we see who did it and why they did it and how they did it. No,
Mhm.
we're in real life. We have only our perspective, only the information we have. There's going to be situations where you don't have all the details, but you're still going to have to make it right.
Mhm.
And that's really important. The other tough conversation that we're having, and I think that this played a part in this situation as well, is technology. In the state of Georgia, you are not allowed to record anyone's conversation without their knowledge, even in your own home.
Mhm.
However, it doesn't actually apply to cameras unless it's recording video
Mhm.
or recording the audio. And so we have a situation where I think that this particular seller also created a narrative because he was paying way too much attention to the cameras. Who's coming in, judging the buyers that were coming in, judging how they walked around, judging what they looked like at in the house. And I think that that's where you have to be really, really, really careful with sellers and buyers. Like we talked a lot about buyers last time, coming into a home and making a narrative about the seller based on what they see on the walls and the decor and that kind of thing. The flip side is the seller is watching people walk into his house. Can that person afford it? Are they a neighbor? Is that somebody from high school that had a grudge on me? Like
Mhm.
where does it go? Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that in addition to this situation, there was a piece of it where the seller was watching the cameras too closely, which
Mhm.
is a conversation we have up front with them as a listing conversation. Don't watch the cameras. Like, make sure your house is safe, right? Oh yeah, oh good. My 1 o'clock appointment came at 1:05. Perfect. Oh, that's good. Okay, great.
Mhm.
That's fine. But listening to what they say, judging it, creating a whole story around them being in your house, that's where you have to be really careful.
Mhm.
And you have to warn the sellers about that ahead of time. It's easy to make snap judgments about people or to decide that they loved the house or hated the house or that they did something to the house in that moment because you saw something. But the reality is, if you are not there, you don't have the full perspective.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Also, you need to have a conversation on the buyer side because some buyers will go through and be like, try to nitpick it, and not that they don't like the home, but they're looking for the flaws because no one wants to have their rose-colored glasses on when you look at a home and go, "Oh, it's perfect," and then be on a second look, go through and be like, "Ooh, I missed all of this," and the inspection report showed a million things that were blatant and obvious, and you probably were not put an offer on a home in the first place. And they try to do it. And my thing is, if I walk into a home and I see a ring doorbell or something like that, I try to tell the my buyers like, "Hey, just so you know, they're going to be able to hear a lot. There probably is an Alexa device or something else because once you go with a Ring doorbell, you probably have some kind of Siri, Alexa, or Google device. Um, so try to have those conversations away from the side of the property, but there's still emotions in it and stuff gets said. and whether the seller hears it or not, it shouldn't affect, but it does. We all are affected by
It
people
does.
what say. Our home
Yeah.
is our personal space, so it's easy to take offense to something that is said or done. And like, I get it, because it would happen to anybody, because you take pride in we all take pride in our home. This is where we live. So, but it's good to warn the buyers and stuff too, like, hey, let's just try and keep it down and write it down, and then we can talk about it once we're away from the property, which Lauren's had to do with me when I was a buyer for her.
Yeah. Not at the front door. Don't talk about the property at the front door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we learn it, but that's not the only time we have these tough conversations. Sometimes you get under contract, everyone's happy, and for whatever reason, say for instance there's a contingency. I'm going to create a scenario that actually happened to me, and our house was under contract. When we bought the property, they didn't pull permits for a thing, but no one said anything to us about it. It was never mentioned. It wasn't found by our realtor. That's fine. However, when we sold the property, those permits came up as never being closed out, and our 3-bedroom became a 2-bedroom.
Ooh.
And
I was gonna say this wasn't me. This wasn't Georgia.
yeah, that wasn't Georgia. It was in Florida. It was the first house we ever purchased, and so they did a price reduction, and we had taken that as an insult because it was a perfectly livable room, closets, everything else. But because the permits are closed or not closed, it wasn't worth having to come in and do an inspection and check the walls to make sure everything was built correctly. So we took that price reduction. With that weighing heavy on our minds, we took that into our house, and there were some issues with that house. And we went, well, we're getting a price reduction. And that seller said, no. And we walked away from that house. And it was just like us carrying those emotions from a different transaction in bringing them into this new transaction. It wasn't our realtor's fault. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It was just, it was what it was. And
Mm-hmm.
this stuff came up, and we took those emotions, and it cost us a house. And to this day, my wife goes, we should have bought that house. It is, and it was just, it was like a petty thing, but it was an emotional thing. This just happened to us. And then when our inspection report came in, we're like, we're doing it to them too. And it was like, we were caught up in that moment. It probably could have been avoided if there was a better conversation happening. Something that could have been handled. Our realtor should have pulled us aside and said, hey, let's calm down. Because they
Yeah.
were on our selling side and on our buying side, and it could have been prevented. And it cost us a house that my wife still talks about today.
Inspections are a really great place to talk about these tough conversations
There are a
because,
lot of them.
before you go into the inspection period, letting people know this is a house. I don't know where it is, how it is in your state, but in Georgia, we don't require sellers to be up to current code. And yet your inspection is going to refer to current code.
Uh-huh.
It's just the way it is. So we see a lot of things that are just a few years old that are coming up on inspection reports. And it doesn't mean the house is bad or anything's wrong with it. It just means that the code has changed. There's a better way to do it now. You might need to do it, right? But it's not a stop sign. It's more of a
Uh-huh.
yield sign. And being able to have that conversation up front. And a lot of times, you've heard me say it before, I refer it to dating, right? After
Uh-huh.
the honeymoon phase, your
Oh
other
yeah.
person couldn't do any wrong. Everything was great. It was amazing. And then suddenly you start to see like the reality. And
Uh-huh.
you get over the reality if you stay together with that person. You do get over the reality, and you make peace with it. You come to terms with it, and you figure out, what can I live with, what can I not live with, and that's where, if you're dating, you break up or move on. But and
Uh-huh.
with a house, same thing. You terminate, you move on, but you're going to find things. A
Oh
house
yeah.
is essentially it's a living, breathing thing. It's the air changes, the temperature changes, where you live, how you live in it changes, and it makes a difference. You have to realize that even though a house feels very static to us, it's not actually static. It's
Uh-huh.
dynamic. the roof is aging with every rainstorm and hailstorm, and the HVAC is being used every season, hot and cold, and even the way you use the house. We talk about sometimes, ooh, this house was lived in hard. Did they have four 200-pound boys wrestling and jumping down the stairs every day for 10 years?
Yeah.
Or did they have, just tiny little dogs that went up and down the steps, right?
Hmm.
And,
Oh yeah.
stairs make a difference. If you step on it,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it may have been lived in harder. It may just need to be screwed down. You don't know the difference till you inspect it. But a lot of times people get caught up and they feel like the house is perfect
And then they
until
get
the
surprised.
inspection. Hmm.
Yeah, I try to. That's a preemptive conversation I have. Like this things look great, but if you get a good inspector, it's gonna look bad. Like I
Hmm.
want a big report with every little thing. I was like, I'd rather have the scary stuff and walk you through this inspection report to know absolutely everything that is wrong with this house, and not to get caught up on it, because if you get a good one, they're going to nitpick every little detail in the whole home, whether it be a couple of GFI outlets to the slope of the lawn around the house. Like I want everything written down,
Hmm.
and I don't want an empty report. If I get an empty report, they didn't do their job.
Yeah,
You know.
100%. And I think that, a great inspector is one of your best assets, one of your best tools. There's a company that I really like, and that, Jonathan, you've worked with them as well. And I like them because of their reports.
Mm-hmm.
In the reports, they say, hey, this is a red item, fix it now.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is a maintenance item. You're going to need to do this on a regular basis. Even if you fix it right now, you're going to need to do it again because this is home ownership. And then they have other things that are like, hey, this needs to be done, but you have time. It doesn't need to
Yeah,
be done right
I
this
like the way
second.
they do the reports. We decided to not use one of the individuals because we pointed out we had a property where we knew going in we wanted it. When we went back for the inspection, some stuff came out that we pointed out to the inspector, and we left the inspection early because we were unhappy with the property, not the inspector. And what ended up happening was, because we already informed him that like we've seen too much, that we're not going to go forward with this property, he felt that it was okay to leave the property and not finish the inspection. And then he didn't put the stuff that was pointed out to us in the inspection report. So when the seller purchased or asked us about the inspection report, because we walked away, we didn't have anything to show him because it wasn't in the report, and it left us with a bad taste in our mouth. But we know better next time to just like, hey, do finish the report. That way we can show them why and have it in the report. And that's a conversation I probably should have had with the inspector before we left, rather than going, hey man, we've seen too much. We already know we're leaving. And but I probably shouldn't have had to have that conversation with the inspector. Should have still finished it because we paid him to do the job. But it was one of those ones where it left us with half of a report, which was really weird. So we have those
Yeah,
conversations
I
too.
think I think that's just, kind of that.
That's an
Yeah,
individual. It wasn't a company
yeah,
thing.
yeah. And I think it's hard because most sellers would not want the report.
It was just enough stuff. It was
Yeah.
not small stuff. And it was like we had that conversation, and then he called me back 3 days later. It's like, we put in an insurance claim. We're going to get a new roof put on this thing. We're putting in to get estimates to replace all the windows. I mean, it was big problems. It
Hmm.
was like, needs
Yeah.
roof, needs windows, needs everything. And it was like, oh, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, having that report would be really good. I think that it's one of those things where you don't always know that a transaction is fully dead either,
yeah,
right?
it could have
And
come
so,
around and be like, we decided we still want the property, and we can
mhm.
replace that stuff.
I think I had one of my longest transactions. It was just kind of a fluke. There was an IRS problem, and this was right as COVID was hitting, and the IRS was just not in person, and everything was really hard to get a hold of things. And we went under contract, and we were under contract, I think, for something like 100 days,
Oh,
because we had an IRS, and every week I remember calling the seller's agent and like begging, please, please. I pulled all the cards. I said, please, she's a single mom. She has 3 kids.
Mm,
We got to get into the school district. We've got to, she's got to have a place to live. And just hang on, just another week, just another week. And they stuck with us. But having those hard conversations and those every
yeah.
single week with the agent
A
and
100 days
begging,
during COVID, she could have probably got another
it
$40,000 for that
it
house.
was the beginning of COVID. So
Oh, okay. When
thank
things were
goodness.
going
It
the
was
other
the
way.
very, very beginning. It was right before,
You're
it
lucky
was
because
before
if
things
it was
shot up.
another 6 months into COVID, it would have gone the other way quick.
Yeah.
Because 100
Yeah.
days is a lot of money difference in that house.
Yeah, it was very it was tight, but we wound up doing it because I called that agent and I kept that conversation going, and just it was just constant. That conversation was constant. We're trying. Here's where we are today. I gave her
Keeping them in the loop helps for
I kept
sure.
her in a loop. I gave her constant updates. I let her know we are actively moving forward. We are doing this. We are doing this, and it saved the deal.
Hmm.
And I think that that's where that communication comes in, knowing that the person that you're talking to is not your adversary, but your partner. And when I say that, I'm talking about your seller, I'm talking about your buyer, and I'm talking about the other agent as well. The
Hmm.
more you can work with the other person that you're speaking to, the better everything is going to be.
Agreed. Yeah. Communication is the key, and good communication goes a long way. Like just doing check-ins, even if like you got through all your due diligence, you've done through your inspection, still keep in contact with your buyers and your sellers and let everyone know what's going on. Keep in contact with your closing and thing, because all the way up to the end, you could still have a wrench thrown into the thing, and if you don't want to be the calling only when it's bad news, like financing didn't go through and having that tough conversation, or things
Mhm.
didn't happen, or appraisals used to take longer. You get through everything and you're like everything's good, and you're waiting a couple of weeks, and then next thing you know, your appraisal comes in right before closing and throws a wrench in everything, you know. So you want to be in good conversations, because if you count your conversations, if we have 15 good ones and one bad one, we're doing okay. You
Yeah.
know?
And speaking of appraisals, even having that conversation with the appraiser,
Yeah.
talking to the appraiser, having the comparables, like, hey, here's where we saw the value, here's how we priced it,
Hmm. Yeah,
here's my
it can change
information.
good information because they may have not seen it, and
And
you're allowed to do that.
up
Hmm.
front, not once he's written the whole report. Once an appraiser has written the whole report, rarely do you have any changes.
Hmm.
However, up front, you have a lot more power to inform his decision up front.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's if you're the one representing the seller, you should definitely be there to go over what you saw on the property with the appraiser before they go into your property, because it goes a long way. Obviously, you're not trying to manipulate things in a bad way. You want to show honesty in what you're showing them.
Yeah, what? No,
So,
100%. But so I don't. I try to not annoy appraisers because they don't want to talk to agents, right? They do what
hmm.
they can to avoid us. However, I want to give helpful, honest information. They may not be able to see all the upgrades that your seller has put in. Something like heated floors in the bathroom can't always be seen unless they
Hmm.
know what that switch looks like.
Hmm.
You don't always know, like, hey, this side of the street goes to this school, which is rated a 9. That side of the street goes to this school, which is rated a 2.
Yeah,
Please be careful, because if you use those comps or too many of those comps,
you're gonna
it's
bring down the value.
yeah,
Yeah.
the value's going to change. There might be some information that they just don't know, right? Like, hey, we just replaced the main water line, and that's worth this in this neighborhood because all of the water lines are failing. And if you haven't done it, it's only
It's looming.
yeah. And so there may be things that they can't see. So be a helpful, kind presence, not an overbearing. You're not trying to fight with them. Once again, they're an
Hmm.
adversary. They have no benefit to tanking your sale. Their
Yeah,
job
it's
is to
true.
come up with a fair and accurate price. But if they don't have all the information, then how could they have possibly done their job?
Yeah, yeah, makes complete sense.
Hmm.
You don't want to. I mean, obviously, if you're representing the seller, you want that number as high as possible, and if you're representing the buyer, Well, I guess that comes with circumstances because sometimes
Yeah, I was gonna say low
you
as
don't really
possible
want it to be
doesn't.
as low as possible. You want it to be the right number. But as a seller, obviously, the higher that number is, the happier you are for your client. You know.
Yeah, I mean, at contract price becomes the magical word when it comes to appraisals, as far
Hmm.
as I'm concerned. Because too high, the seller feels like they left money on the table, and if it's way too high, it can sometimes mess up a deal, especially if it's an FHA or VA. But the other thing that we see is that's just a magical word. If the buyer thinks it comes too high or too low, it just messes things up. So, at
Hmm.
contract price is kind of magic.
Now, the next topic I want to get into is, it hasn't happened to me as an agent because I'm a newer agent and I know it's going to happen, but I've had to do it from a buyer side. And sometimes knowing, after you have all these tough conversations with us, sometimes you still have to make that decision for yourself and your in your mind to terminate a client realtor relationship. That's extremely tough. I'm too new. I haven't had enough clients to have to go through this, so I can't speak to it from the realtor side. And knowing when to walk away from a deal, you may not even be under client contract with them. You may have that meeting with them, whether before you post a listing or even with a buyer, and know that this relationship's not going to work out. And sometimes you have to look past the finances of, hey, I just want to get this property listed, or I just want to make this sale. Sometimes you have to think about yourself and your own well-being and know that it's not worth the stress. And it took me a long time to learn this in my other industry. It's okay to say no to for me, a tattoo that is not going to look good in a couple of years and stuff, and know that you're making the right decision and saying no to that money to make sure that person's happier long term. Because I can make you happy today and give you everything you want, but tomorrow you still have to live with this decision. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And as a buyer, I had an agent that wasn't listening to our needs. The very first agent we ever worked with, and we were going in, and their their personal life had gotten in the way with. They didn't even put our offer in. They didn't even submit it
Oh, whoa,
on a property
that's a big deal.
because they went away instead. And it was another situation, but I don't want to get into it because I'm good friends with that person, and since then, but just those early days was stuff, and we didn't know better. We were using a friend as our agent and trying to do stuff, and it was more of a loose thing. We weren't under actual contract with them. We never signed any paperwork. And it ended up causing a little rift, and then we had to decide to go elsewhere. Like, this isn't working out, you know.
Hmm.
Got really frustrating, and yeah. And then when we didn't use them for another contract, it also caused questions like, well, I'm your friend and how to do this, and it's like, then we all both remember that situation differently, you know. But
Hmm.
probably should have never gone in with them in the first place because we were such good friends.
Yeah, it makes a difference, and you can make that decision for yourself if you do that with friends, or if you don't work with friends. That maybe that's something that's a policy. I specifically don't enjoy working with assholes.
Yeah, no,
And
that's fair.
so in my business plan, I have a no asshole policy. I don't want to be cursed at. I don't want to be yelled at. I don't I feel like we're adults and sometimes conversations can get heated, but there's a different level. This is professional. You
Hmm.
you don't do certain things, and I'm an adult and I can choose how I want to work with people. And so I do have some standards that I put in place for myself. But I've had to make the decision to terminate listing contracts before. One time I had a seller that refused to fix a problem with mold and was wanting to cover it up. And for me, that was
That's an ethical
ethical.
dilemma.
It was
Yeah.
ethical. And the girl that was looking at the house, she was a single mom. She had a brand new baby. And I could not fathom bringing a newborn baby into a house that had a mold issue that the seller he was going to sell or be the landlord. It was a weird time in the market where whatever was the best he was going to do. I couldn't imagine a situation where I could look someone in the face and tell them
Yeah.
that there was no problem, and that's what he was expecting me to do. And so I said, I'm sorry, I can no longer represent you. I don't feel comfortable about this.
Hmm.
Now, I was a newer agent then. Maybe there was a better way to have that conversation. When
Hmm.
I look back on it, I think about how I've grown as a communicator, right? Not just an agent, but as a communicator. And that now I've had more classes on how to speak to people, how to have tough conversations. There's a wonderful book Phil Jones has written, What to Say,
Hmm.
and he has it for realtors as well. Do you
I'm
have it right
looking
there?
behind me
I
because
don't. I have it.
I
I have
have
it
it
somewhere.
somewhere. It's a small book.
Yeah, my bookshelf is over there. I don't. It's not behind me. But yeah, it's not a long. It's not a long read. It's not super expensive. It's one you should read multiple times. You
Hmm.
know, it's there's things you can do, and so I think about like, hey, if I had been more experienced with these tough conversations, could I have convinced him to do more about that? Maybe
Yeah.
not. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but you know, how could I have done it differently? And that's something that I do think
Yeah.
about sometimes. That practicing the tough conversations and saying what you need to say kindly, honestly, and in a helpful way can make such a difference.
Oh yeah, and that going back to that book is genius because it's subtle changes in certain word cues that you use to initiate a feeling in the person you're having conversation. So it helps you present bad news in a way that makes them think about it differently by just changing certain wording. And it also, I mean, to me, that book is all about the right way to approach tough conversations by putting
Hmm.
people in the shoes, by showing interest and stuff. And it's a fascinating book. And it's one of those books, like, as I was reading it, I was going, if only there was a way to memorize and use this for every conversation and approaching, because there's, although it's not a big book, like it is really, really good information. I
Yeah.
highly recommend the book. And it's just one of those things where it's like every time they did it, and they do the example and they explain why it does what it does, and you're like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's definitely a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. It will
Yeah.
make this
And to
whole
read it several times, like you said,
yeah.
the more you practice it and the more you do it over and over again, it's not a big book, but it's about internalizing the concepts of I care, I'm here to help. Let me give you the honesty so that we can
Mhm.
get you into the right place. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah. One of our agents in our office actually has like a summarized version of the book with just the key phrases to use
Hmm.
taped on his wall so he can refer to it on a most notes while he's in a conversation with a client, you
As long
know.
as he's looking at a wall while he's talking to the client.
Yeah.
I find that most of my conversations are face to face. So,
Well, you know what I mean. Like, if you do a lot of cold calling, having that, it does have
hmm,
a lot of influence and sway to get people to think things through. And I mean, having a daily reminder of it's probably not a bad thing too. Like, oh
yeah,
yeah, I didn't use that
100%.
when I could have used that yesterday.
Hmm. Yeah. And you know, honestly, when you are better at having tough conversations, it improves every relationship in your life.
Oh yeah,
From your significant other to your kids to your parents. I mean, every daily interaction can be better when you are better at tough conversations.
yeah. So stop trying to avoid them. Jump in with both feet. Go. No,
Go wreak
don't
some
follow my
havoc.
advice.
Go pick some fights so you can no, just
Well,
kidding.
that's the only way you get practice.
Well, yeah. Well, oh no.
Um, yeah.
You
So
know,
sometimes
mhm,
I lost my outline. It fell. I don't
you're
know what the
good.
next topic is.
The next topic is we close.
Oh, yeah,
Summary.
we're there. Listen, it turns out when you get to talking about tough conversation, time flies. I didn't realize we had already gone to this length.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I think that the most important thing to think about is just to be honest and caring and try to give the information as fast as possible. I don't mean your conversation is quick. I mean as soon as possible, as early as possible. The time only creates narratives and storylines and
hmm,
you know, and once you have something in somebody's head, it's much harder for them to open their mind once
yeah, I
they
agree.
already have the storyline written.
If you know something's going to be an issue in 2 weeks, talk about it now, not
Hmm.
in 2 weeks when the issue actually gets there. Because at some point, I'm like, if you knew this was going to happen, why didn't you talk about it? Yeah, it could have been a tough conversation, but getting it out of the way, getting it taken care of, as soon as you know, the better it is for you and your client.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
100%. So,
Okay.
so yeah,
All right,
start
everybody.
start talking.
Yeah, everyone. Yeti ready? Summertime,
Yeah.
cooler. Put your information in. There's a link down below. I put it in every description of every video. Like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, guys.